10 Steps Further is a podcast designed to help you get 10 steps further along your spiritual journey. If you've been on your journey for 30 years or 30 minutes, if you believe in God, or even if you're not sure He exists, all we're trying to do is help you get 10 steps further. I'm Jonathan, and this is Jack, and we're just taking a walk. Why don't you join us?
At this point, I'm going to bring up my two buddies, Jonathan and Chad, because we are doing church a little differently today, and I hope you don't leave and never come back, all right? That's how confident I am today. We have, over the last several months at Canyon Springs, we've started a new way of doing ministry. If you are brand new to Canyon Springs, let me explain to you the images that you see every week when you show up to Canyon Springs. You'll notice when you look on the stage, and they're not here because we didn't have a place for them, but you'll notice that there are 5 wooden people on one side, and there is 1 wooden person on the other side. Who's noticed that? All right? Very good. They're there every week. For those of you who haven't lifted up your hand, very good. Notice next week. The idea of that is very simple. It's our mission statement. Our mission statement is, it's about the one. So you are not going to find peace and purpose in your life until you are in relationship with this God of the universe. And He wants to forgive you of your sin, and He wants to help you, start a new life. He wants to take away all those bad habits that honestly, you're just hurting yourself. And He wants to give you a new life. Well, once you have that in that relationship with God, that's amazing. But your job's not over. Because then it's still about the one. First, it's about being in relationship with the one. Secondly, it's about reaching the next one. And that next one could be on your soccer team or your basketball team, or at your high school or your junior high. They could be a coworker. They could live down the street from you. It could be a family member. I talked to a woman today. It's her husband. Her one is her husband. And just as an encouragement to any of you who are in that situation, our church is filled with people who used to come as just as mom, and now it's mom and dad who are sitting here. And it used to just be dad, but now it's dad and mom coming to Canyon Springs. God has a way of working in those people's lives. So it's not just about reaching us, it's about reaching the next one. Well, we have created a new way to do that. And so today we're going to be doing a live version of that. Our 10 Steps podcast is about 3 months old. About 3 months old. And God is using it in a big way. So today we are doing a live podcast that you are going to be a part of. And even if you hate it, you got free food, right? Right? So I'm going to take my seat here. I got my 2 buddies. Did you bring me my coffee? You got my coffee? That's all right. Got my coffee.
And I'm done.
In my 10 Steps Further cup. You can see that. We have a little 10 Steps Further swag. Yep. So, guys, we've been doing this for about 3 months now. And it's kind of Jonathan's idea. And Chad saw that we were, people liked it, so he wanted to join us.
And made it better.
Right.
I talked to a friend of mine back in Spokane, and he's been watching it, and he said, man, I really been enjoying the podcast, and I really like Chad.
Yes.
So you contribute. You're welcome.
That's
All
not
reviews of my name are taken.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
So the idea of our 10 Steps podcast is really to take you 10 steps further in your spiritual journey. Whether you started in step 1 or you started in step 100, whether you've just begun or you've been 30 years in this journey, we just want to talk about some subjects that will help you go 10 steps further.
It's like getting people from everywhere. We have a guy in the UK listening to it.
Yeah, do you have a review?
I got the review. So he's in Wellborough. Anybody ever been to Wellborough, United Kingdom? Andy, you been there?
Jenny has been there. No? Yeah.
Jenny? All right. I've not been there. I've never met this guy, but he says, really loving the 10 Steps Further podcast. Myself and my wife have been listening to them each night together. Very encouraging and great to hear 2 men. So Chad wasn't counted in this one. It's all right. Of God.
2 men, 1 boy.
Discuss God's word and questions people may have about God's house or what's going on in today's world. And then he just talks about being in England and how he's listening to it in a different time zone, and so he feels like he's cheating.
I got one from someone that's new to their faith, which I found super encouraging. And she said, I'm new to the Christian faith, and what I love most about this podcast is that Jack and Jonathan make it easy to listen along. I find myself relating, laughing, and eager to listen more. I have never felt intimidated by the information or word because the delivery is so real and comfortable. I'm here taking the lessons week by week and getting 10 steps further every time. P.S. Chad is awesome. So
So
I
you
may or may not have that about myself. But it's cool. What I love to see is that there's actually people that are new. Like when I was new to my faith, podcast is such a new thing. So I love that people new to their faith, they do have a tool like this.
That's right. That's right. You have one more.
Yeah, I have one more. Stephanie, here it is. Let's see. This is it. The whole review is based around two different things because she sent it basically as a comment because she's a friend of mine from Spokane. She says, speaking of your podcast, I've watched all of them as of yesterday. My only criticism, I wish there were more good things to come for those who wait, right? I really enjoyed this podcast, especially because this is new territory for me. I appreciate you and Jack breaking things down, sharing experiences, and the humor. Oh gosh, I found myself literally laughing out loud to some of your conversations. I also may or may not have done a 10 Steps Further Netflix-style binge yesterday. So look, somebody likes it.
Our goal as a church is to make a difference in the world and to reach as many people as we can. This podcast has the potential to not just reach hundreds in our community, but really thousands around the world. And so for this next year, one of the things that we're doing is we're just committed to doing 52, to getting one out every week, and to seeing it grow. And you guys can help us with that. You can subscribe to it and listen to it. If you like it, you can review it. If you don't like it, don't review it.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Put it on your Facebook
Those
page.
reviews are huge. Raise your hand if you listen to podcasts. There's a lot of podcasters out there. If you don't know this, the reviews and the stars is what gets your podcast momentum within iTunes and whatever network you're on, Android, whatever. And so those reviews and the stars are so important, and it's so easy to do too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to start in just a second. We'll start off with our little theme song in just a moment, but we just need to help you help us, okay? If you guys can help us, that would be great. First off, we're doing this live, so we want people to hear you. So when we shout to you, say, hey, we're here in front of our live studio audience today, I will point to you and I want you to cheer. So let's try that. All right, we're here with our live studio audience. Let's hear it.
Okay, and if Jack's jokes aren't hitting that great and I give you a thumbs up, that's a laugh. Okay?
That's every Sunday though, bro. That's every Sunday. We are also going to do some questions, which is great about having a live audience, that we're going to do our podcast, but then we're going to ask you for questions. And so Taylor's in the back. Wave your hand. All right. So if you have a question when we ask for that, just please raise your hand and Taylor will find you and we'll hopefully be able to answer that. And also we end every podcast like this. We will say, and if you do that, you'll get
10 steps further.
Okay, so let's practice that. We're going to practice that. I'll point to you. And if you do that, you'll get
10 steps further.
Okay, that sounds really pathetic. Let's try it again. If you do that, you'll get
10 steps further.
Okay, that sounds great. We ready to go? Roll it. Audio.
We've got a picture.
We have a picture, but we don't have audio.
It'll be the first picture in the slides. Here it comes.
Hopefully this will go better than this.
Yes.
We're waiting for it.
For it.
Brian, you got the button picked and okay. I hear something.
Yeah. I could just do this. I could do it myself.
We'll just have Ron come up, slap out the bass.
Is Ron?
Yeah.
Yeah. We could just roll.
Is the computer frozen, Bill?
It's very cold. I'm looking.
Let's just roll.
All right, that was a good idea that didn't work. All right, which is probably what we're going to be saying after this whole thing. It's a good idea that didn't work. All right.
It's New Year's Eve.
Okay, Jonathan.
Fresh start tomorrow.
Jonathan kicks us off. Go ahead, buddy.
All right, so today we're starting another podcast. Today we're doing it in front of a live group of people today. We normally do this in my little office And the three of us, Chad's here with us as well.
Hey, hey.
And that's his intro. I like that. And we normally do it in my office, but we had this idea as, hey, our church is all coming together for one service on New Year's Eve. And so we're recording this New Year's Eve live. Say hi, guys. And our topic for today, what we're going to talk about is deep thoughts on going deeper. Just spiritual maturity, what is that all about? Again, Jack picks the topics, and I wrestle with him about them. So here we go.
That's right. Okay, so this is the first thing I've written in my notes about deep thoughts, what it means to be a mature Christian. And the first thought is, let's try not to get defensive. Yeah. Because there's nothing that makes pastors more defensive than somebody walking up to them and saying, you're just not deep enough.
Right. Well, and we've had this conversation 3 times, I think, already. And you have some stories, some scars that you've had of people say some things to you.
Deep scars.
Some bitterness
deep scars
came up.
Well, you get it both ways. So I had one couple come to me and say, man, we are just so glad to be at Canyon Springs because we were at the Rock. Sorry, Rock. We were at the Rock and it just wasn't deep enough. And so we love it here. Well, that couple left after a while. And do you know the reason why they left? Yeah, because I wasn't deep enough, so that pretty much happens to all of us. I know that probably happened to you too.
Yeah, and I know it will. I've only been in ministry for 5 years now, and I think it will. It's just,
and he's pretty deep.
I am very so deep. I think and we're going to talk about today. I hate using the language of deep because how everyone defines deep is different. I'm in seminary right now, and I'm talking to everyone, different streams of faith, and I always talk to them about this topic. How a charismatic person will define deep is really intense worship, And then for my Reformed friends, they'll say, no, that's not deep. They're like, being in the Word is deep. Being in the Bible is deep. So even using the language of deep is tough because I'll say to you, hey, come to my church, it's deep. If you're a Pentecostal, you're going to expect some really high energy, awesome, intimate worship. Mm-hmm. If you're a Reformed, theologian, you're going to think, oh, deep. So you're going to go to my church and think it's going to be all Bible study. Right. So if I invite you to my church and I say it's deep, you're already making a kind of a presumption about you're presuming something about what the church is going to be like. Right. So even that language is tough. It's tough language.
Okay, but that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for you to say that somebody came to you and said you weren't deep enough. And you didn't say that. So now I'm the only one.
No, it happens. Totally happens. And then I always say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by deep? People will say, I want youth group, or I want this, I want small groups, I want this to go deeper. And I try to find out, what do you mean by that? Because everyone means something different. And then I do try to address it. And a lot of the times it's community. It comes down to I'm not connected. And so I really work to try to get people connected. But
I had a friend that came back from a small group one night, and he was telling me, man, we really went to some deep places last night in our small group. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, somebody started sharing just openly about some struggles that they had gone through, and then everybody just started kind of laying all their junk on the table. And I said, well, I think we need to be careful that we don't describe going deep with the Lord as whining together. I wasn't trying to be harsh, but it kind of felt like that's what they were talking about. It's just like, man, was there any celebration? Was there any victory in that? Or was it just, hey, we really feel we got vulnerable together? And there's value in that. I wouldn't take that away, but it really was, I felt like we were missing something in the midst of it. It was just, hey, we had this great session,
So I would have totally responded differently. I totally would have, because that sounds awesome. I think that sounds amazing that people came together and they shared their stuff. Because how many times do you come to church and you have to put on a face, or you have to look like your family's together, or you have to, when we share about our lives, we share about things, sins that we've had, but we used to have them a long time ago.
Right.
And now that we don't struggle with it anymore, now I can bring them up now. And so that to me sounds like
real in the moment.
Yeah, people getting real. So how would you define depth?
The way that I look at depth is just, it's more. I kind of have always, my Christian walk has always been one of, there's more. When it comes to worship, there's more. There's more than what I experience. There's more intimacy with the Lord. There's more that He offers than I have. When it comes to understanding His Word, there's more. There's more than I know. When it comes to calling and being able to reach out around the world, whether it's missions or just sharing my faith with people in the grocery store, God would do more. And so I think for me, it's just understanding the gap between my reality and the potential.
Okay, so I have to tell you my favorite story about Christmas. When my daughter Sterling, who's right here, who was just singing a couple of seconds ago, when she was about 4 years old, we would say to her after she opened a present, "So, what do you say?" And she would say, "More."
Joe does that?
I think I was looking for thank you. Yeah, she's over that now, but
I think that's such a great definition of it, and I think what we have to come to realize sometimes is that what is that more in our lives? And I think with this whole deepness and wanting more of Jesus, it's how are we posturing ourselves towards the church? Because it's really easy to look to the church for more and expect the church to give more, and then when the church comes up empty-handed, to feel like that. Okay, well, because here's what happens: American culture. We got a bunch of Californians in the room. If I want animal fries and one of the best hamburgers in California, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to In-N-Out. American consumerism, if I want spirituality and deepness, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to the church.
Right.
Naturally, which is what we should do. But then what happens is we go to church, we're looking for this deepness. The church's job is to provide environments for the deepness. We'll provide small groups for deepness, we'll provide discipleship groups for deepness. But then what happens, now the ball's in your court. So how do you posture yourself towards the church? Are you expecting the church to draw you deeper, or are you expecting Jesus to draw you deeper?
Right.
And so I have one scripture.
Go ahead.
So 1 Corinthians 3:6 says, "I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow." And so you talk about how people say, "Oh, you're not deep," or "Miles is deeper," or whatever. And in Corinth, they had the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, no, Apollos isn't deep enough. Paul's not deep enough. And there's this big kind of faction going on. People are splitting, and Paul humbles himself. He says, "Listen, it's not about the speakers. God's going to do the watering." And so I think what we do is we try to partner with people, give them environments to go deep, but then essentially growing it closer to Jesus is a lot. It's on us a lot in our faith.
So what drives me crazy is when people come into the church and what their idea is I want more knowledge, and I have no problem with that. If that's how because some people are built that way. Some people are very intellectual, and so they want more knowledge. They want to know more about the Bible, which I would say is amazing. But the purpose of that knowledge is not so that you get smarter. The purpose of that knowledge is so that you take that knowledge and you make a difference in the world, or you take that knowledge and you change the people around you. So here's my verse. Philippians 1:9-10 says this. Paul's saying this. "This is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you'll be able to discern what's best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ." So what he's saying is this. Look. What people hear is knowledge and depth of insight. But if you listen to that verse, it says this, that my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight. The knowledge and depth of insight is for one reason, so that I can learn to love you better, and you can learn to love your neighbor better, and you can learn to love your kid better, and you can grow in all of those relationships. And it's not just about getting enough knowledge so that I'm smart enough and I can show off to my friends.
You'll love this phrase. It's, I think Mike Erie said it. He said, "How you hold your theology is much more important than the theology you hold." And you see with Jesus, man, Jesus was conservative in his theology, but he was so progressive in the way he loved people. He had some opinions, but he held people so much closer than he did his views. And so I think it's our calling. It's like, man, Jack doesn't say this to many people, so I'm going to brag about him. We have a really smart pastor. This guy went to Biola for seminary. I'm in seminary right now. Biola is a very tough place to get a seminary degree. So he knows a ton of theology, but how he holds it is in a very loving way. He's not going to slam it down your throat, shove the Bible in your face. He's going to translate it into a language you can understand. So when Jack's telling all these stories, he's actually taking some really deep theological stuff, and he's translating it into a language that is very easy for people to understand, which is actually very hard to do in theology. It's so much easier just to throw out all the big words. Did I say that how you wanted me to?
That's so good. Well, we started the church on these verses, and these verses were kind of that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. And so that was why we started, because I was speaking at this camp, and I would have people come in, and I'd speak for a week. I'd give my best message. They'd leave. They'd think I'm great. But we wanted you to know who we were and our lives. Well, over time that changed, and I think the verse that kind of most defines Canyon Springs is this verse: "Teach those who are rich to be rich in good deeds." so that your knowledge goes into making a difference in the world. And man, and I'm asking for audience participation, don't you see that? I mean, every week you see that. You see that people are going on a mission trip, that people are reaching out to Mexico. Even just this last week, we raised 500 pounds of food for the San Diego Food Bank, and we have a team in Haiti who are giving gifts to kids. It's ridiculous, right? Yeah, see, look at that. I like it.
I think one of the, as I've been pondering, I've actually had some conversations outside of this group of just like, man, where do I go with this? Because the stuff that's on my heart and the things, I feel like we're blessed to be where we are. I feel like what the church is doing is amazing. I feel like there's evidence all over of what God's doing. And yet at the same time, I still feel this like, that you can do the things, and this is not an accusation because like I said, I feel like God's in the midst of what we're doing, but that you can do the things without God, without Jesus in it. And that we can miss the bigger thing. I mean, there's just several things that Jesus says there will be those that will stand before him one day, and they'll have a list of all the things that they've done, and he'll say, "Depart from me, I never knew you." And that's, again, I feel like in this context, it's a difficult thing, but it's like we don't want to miss the main thing. We don't want to miss I want more Jesus. I want, at the expense of everything else. We talked about the story of Martha and Mary, two sisters. Martha seemed to be kind of in charge of the house, invited Jesus over. She's serving. Mary's just sitting there like a lazy bum in front of Jesus, listening to him talk while she's serving. And she says, "Jesus, would you tell her to help me?" And Jesus says, "No, she chose the better of the two options. You're serving, she's sitting, and I'm not going to take that from her." There's something about that picture. Even the fact that, Jesus points out that you can sing the songs, "The people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." We can go through all the motions, even doing good things, and miss Jesus in the process. And here's the thing, here's I think the underlying thing for me. You can do the things without Jesus, without the love of God, but you cannot have the love of God and not do the things.
Ooh, that's good.
In
you guys
John,
like that? That's good. Yeah.
Did I see that?
Yeah.
Good.
So in some ways, what you're saying is it's not just the opposite, but I love the way this church makes a difference in the world. And I can look out and see the people that are doing it. But what you're challenging us is, it's not the things.
Right.
It's not about the things.
Right.
Because you can make it about the things. And if I, feed enough homeless people or walk enough old ladies across the street, I'm getting into heaven.
Yeah.
And the opposite is true. It's basically, you got to love me. But if you love me,
You'll do the thing.
you'll do those things.
Yeah.
If you grow in knowledge and depth of insight, you're going to love better.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I think it's in 1 John where it says you cannot say you love God and hate your neighbor.
Yeah.
You can't, those two don't work. If you hate your neighbor, you don't love God. So you cannot have that love for God. So I really feel like my experience has been that growth has been a pursuit of Jesus. And my experience has been trips to Belize and Russia and Cambodia has been not this, well, I'm going to go suffer for the Lord, but really the Lord has invited me into his mission. And it's the best place in the world. Anybody who's gone, right? It's just like, man, I'd go every time if I could. And so it looks from the outside very sacrificial, but oftentimes when you go, you find, man, I don't feel like I'm sacrificing. I feel like I'm getting more out of this than the people I'm going
And that's
to.
exactly what we're saying is the church, we will provide environments, places for you to grow. We're going to plant seeds. We're going to partner with the Spirit in the watering process.
Right.
But it's up to God and you to really grow in your faith. And if you want to grow in those ways, so we're going to provide the environment, ball's in your court. Now you got to make a move.
Yeah.
If you want more, what does more look like for you?
Right.
And if you feel like you're not getting that more, then bring it up to us. Say, hey, I'm not getting more in maybe this part.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we can provide another environment for that.
Right. Or I would say that if you have a question about something that you consider deeper, ask us, email us. I did graduate from Biola. I went to Talbot. In fact, I've been trying to work this in. I graduated with high honors from Talbot.
That was what you were supposed to say. He told you. How many times did he
I know. I've been in ministry for 25 years, and I've never been able to work that in. So it's not that we don't know those things.
And I cheated my way through high school, so if I say it, please.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second about Jonathan's college experience.
I'm not a trustworthy source.
Yeah. So if you have questions, ask us those questions. If you are that person that grows intellectually, push it. Go to seminary classes, find things online, ask us those questions. We will push you in those directions. Because I don't want to say that everybody's like me. Because for me, I grow when I'm moving, when I'm doing, when I'm involved. Yeah. It's like when you guys, everybody in this room has taken a job. When did you learn most about that job? Was it your 4 years of college experience before you took that job? Or was it the 3 months after you took the job that you learned most about that job, right? I mean, I think it's obvious, is that's how we learn. And so if it's all about just knowing, you're never going to put it into practice.
I use a good thing for that, and I always teach this to my kids. I bet I have kids in here that can name all 5 of them, and I've spoken about it with the adults, but we all grow spiritually different in our faith, and you experience the Lord different, Jonathan experiences the Lord different, and Dallas Willard breaks it down to 5 spiritual windows, and he says they're the social, the emotional, the intellectual, the physical, and the spiritual. So social, you hear God speaking through people. Right. You go to a message, man, God's speaking through that pastor. You have the emotional, walks and creativity and music, intellectual conversation, theology, physical, you just go out and you see the ocean, you say, man, that is God's creation. And then the spiritual, Bible study, journaling. And what Dallas Willard says is most of us, we can experience God through all of those, but most of us have 2 that are pretty dominant. Mm-hmm. So we have to identify what those are, and we got to open those windows up often to let God's Spirit breathe through them. Right. And so when I have kids come up to me or friends and they say, man, I'm in such a spiritual rut, I try to identify what their window is. Mm-hmm. And I say, when was the last time you opened that up? You say you love going to the beach. When was the last time you went to the beach? Right. Because when we're in a rut, usually it's because we're ignoring the way we experience God's breath of His Spirit in our life. Right. And so I think we all do grow differently. So we're not saying, being intellectual is bad, being emotional is bad. What we are saying is that none of that can come before Jesus, and Jesus has got to be the end to your means. Yeah.
Right. Well, you put Him first, and then you seek Him in a way that is the best for you and how you were designed, right? Yeah. Okay, so what does that look like for you?
Which one of those? Man, put me on the spot.
Totally.
All of them.
You can't even, because you can't remember them.
No, I have. I have. You're right. There's some truth to that. As you were saying them. It's just like I'm a very audible person, but I have memories of times where it's just God was speaking to me in nature, and that's not my go-to. And music, that God speaks to me in music, that God somehow there's a mind-blowing theology from somebody far deeper than us. That's Miles, maybe.
That hurts. Miles at the Rock. Yeah. They're just down the street.
It can be any of them for me. But I think the place where I found one, I think where I see in Scripture and where I see in experience where God grows us the most is trial, is going through hard stuff, right? I think that's all over the Bible. You go through it, you learn of Jesus in the midst of it. I think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire and they looked in and they threw 4 guys to burn them, and they're in the fire, and they threw 3 guys in, but there's 4 guys in there, and the one looks like the Son of God, and that's where we often meet and grow in Christ. And sometimes when we find I'm in a spiritual rut, it's oftentimes we look at life and it's like everything's kind of flowing smoothly. Yeah, totally.
Can I just say this too? If that's you, if you're the one that finds Jesus in the trial and that you have to go back, like all of a sudden, oh man, I forgot Jesus, because you're in the middle of a trial, right? Don't fear that. Don't kick yourself about that. Don't regret that, because that's just the reality. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, man, that's the reality with my kids. Like if they're struggling or sick or need money, they call me.
Yeah.
Right?
You're like, I love you too.
I know. I very rarely get a, hey, Dad, just want you to know everything's great.
Yep.
So to be able to say, look, I'm going to go back, because I know a buddy in the room who always says to me, man, if it wasn't for this big issue, I would have never turned to God. I feel really bad about that. No way, man. That's how we all are. Yeah. And it drives us.
There's a message I heard years ago about Caleb. And Caleb was going into the land. He was spying out the land, and he wanted to take the land of Israel with Moses. But remember, everybody wimped out, and so they had to wander the desert for 40 years and die. But when they went back into the land, when Joshua took them into the land, Caleb was still alive, and now he's 80. And he said, hey, Moses said I could have the land of the giants. I want the hard stuff. I want to go where the giants are. I want to conquer them, just like I was gonna when I was 40, and I had to wait because these guys were wimps. And so Joshua says, yeah, go take the land of the giants. And I heard this whole message on it that I thought was awesome. He said, how do you remain in the same state of strength at 80 that you had when you were 40. And the whole message was about have the desire to take on the giants. Have the desire to stay in the fight. You know, I don't want some wimpy version of the fight. I don't want to just go in and take some, you know, restful, easy place on the other side of the Jordan. But truly, I want to go where the giants are and take it on. I thought that was profound, that just in our lives, when we not only experience trial, but I think of the people who are in Haiti right now.
Right.
Those are people who are just like, you know what, I live in San Diego, California. I've got every luxury known to man, and I'm going to go to one of the poorest places on the planet because I'm going to see Jesus there, and I'm going to meet with him there, and he's going to work through me, and he's going to show me things that I wouldn't see if I stayed.
So, a couple things. Growth comes through trial, right? Growth comes from putting yourself in a position maybe where you're uncomfortable, but you know God has called you. And I will say this, because people say, man, God hasn't called me to Haiti. Well, he didn't call you to Disney World, and you went there. So give that a try. Just dive in and see that happen. But and so it comes through trial. It comes through difficult situations that are put into our lives. And some of that's on you. Some of that's on putting yourself there.
So you asked him what his spiritual window was. If you were to try to identify one or two of those, for me it's social. When I hear messages or I'm talking to my friends and they point out things in my life, I hear God through people a lot. What about you?
So that's another good point. I think we grow in relationship. And so if I'm with Sedge and we go out to lunch and we're challenging each other about life, then we are growing together, because then he can ask me. In fact, my friend John, who's out in the audience right now, hey John. That was very low, couldn't hear that one. And his gift is encouragement, so the more time I spend with him, the more encouraged I am. Yeah. When you're doing it alone, hard to keep going. It's hard to grow alone.
Yeah.
You need to have other people do that. For me, I would say nature. I just took a hike the other day. I dropped my daughter off for soccer, and then I went for about an hour and a half, 45-minute hike up a dusty hill in Poway. It was really gross, but it was cool because I feel God in nature. And then I got back to my car and my tire was flat. I don't know how those two. It didn't seem right. I guess. Yeah. I guess. So those are some of the things that challenge me. So we're going to get to questions. So if you have a question, be thinking about it that you can ask. But we intentionally at Canyon Springs define maturity a certain way. And there are other places that will define it as the more knowledge that you have. Will you be able to, when you get to heaven, will you be able to pass the Bible quiz? There are other places that will define it differently. We define maturity the same way Animal Planet defines maturity. Who watches Animal Planet? You guys watch Animal Planet? Okay, you watch Animal Planet. It's when does an animal reach maturity? An animal reaches maturity when it is sexually mature, or in other words, when it is able to reproduce itself. I feel like God has challenged us to grow in our relationship with God, to get us to the place where we can reach the next person. When you can care for...
Wonder where that was going. I was like, I haven't heard this one before.
Oh my gosh, just so you know, that's such a lie. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. But it was a good line, though. It was an excellent line.
So it's like discipleship. It's reproducing disciples.
It is. It is what playing your role in the next person's lives, whether that's a person at your work, or a person on the soccer field, or in your family, or your husband. It's not just about you. It's about reaching the next one, and that kind of brings us back to where we're at. So, Taylor, pop up. We want to ask some questions from the audience, and so just so you know, this first question was totally set up. We made Randy come up with the question because we didn't think anybody would. So Randy Waney's going to come up and
questions can be about podcast culture. It can be about what we talked about today. It can really be about
I'm kind of thinking about, as far as depth goes, I don't know why I thought about Randy when I thought about depth, but anyway, we'll try it.
Or even,
let's start off with who won the Holiday Bowl?
MSU.
Michigan State won the Holiday Bowl. Randy is a Michigan State grad. Okay, there you go.
Actually, it was interesting, jumping into the discussion about going deep, and I immediately flashed back to an old song I used to sing in Sunday school, Deep and Wide. So So I'd like to get your thoughts on, as you get deeper, do you automatically go wider? And then how do you live your faith in a workplace environment, things like that? I think that's a real interesting sort of a topic. Would love to get your perspective on.
That is great. As you go deeper, do you go wider? Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, I would say the moments you see Jesus going the deepest it's kind of, they go hand in hand. As he shows us, he is going wider. He's not only calling the Jews that got it together, but he's also calling the Jews that don't have it together, like Matthew. Mm-hmm. He's a tax collector. He says, follow me. Matthew says, I don't have my life together. I can't follow you, basically. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says, no, follow me, and we'll work out the rest on the way. So I think it is going wider. You get to this point in your faith where you love Jesus so much, you're overflowing with his love that you cannot help but go wide and reach out to other people.
Okay, I just want to say, does anybody else have a question? Anybody else have a question? That we want to, they can't see any hands. You're gonna have to find somebody, Taylor.
Stick a mic.
Because I have an answer to that though, and I would say just the opposite, Randy. Like as you go deeper, do you go wider and do more things? I would say that you're actually a pretty good example of that. You get something that you're passionate about. As you grow in this relationship with God, something strikes you, something breaks your heart. You want to make a difference, and yours, Randy's, is homeless people. And so every Sunday, he's there with 50 hot dogs and 50 cold waters that he goes to deliver in San Diego, because that has become your passion. And I know you still do, you do Haiti stuff, you do all kinds of other stuff, but you focused on one. And as you grow deeper, I think God's going to get you in some area. There's going to be some passion, something's going to break your heart, and you're going to dive into that and maybe go deeper into that. Does that make sense?
What about the workplace? Living your faith in your workplace?
I think that one can be tricky, because I feel like the workplace, almost every regular job rubs up against conviction in some way. And so you're kind of forced in this. I think it's just, you just got to be Spirit-led and walking through it in a way that, Lord, what do I do in this situation? And most of the time, it feels like you're going to run into stuff that's just, you're going to say no to. You're going to say no to God at times. Like that's been my. Now, is that the right answer? The right thing to do? No, it's not. You're supposed to say yes to God every time in what He calls you to do in the workplace, and when you're interacting with people that are not have no desire to please God in their actions. And I have found, man, you just live in a place of like, okay, I know what God's calling me to do, but I'm wimping out again. That's been my experience. I've had plenty of like retail type jobs and things like that, because ministry has not always put food on the table. And I have found there are times when I can be a light, and there's so many principles in Scripture to tell you how to do it. But then there are so many times where I just feel like, wow, I compromised again. And
I think in the workplace, it's people look at the pastors and clergy, and they say, oh, they're the ones that are the ministers. And I always say, no, it's like I'm around Christians all day. We minister so that ministers can minister to their workplace. Mm-hmm. So really, the people that are going to the civil engineers, the hairstylists, those are the ones that are in the depths of ministry, that are in the trenches. And so I think the biggest thing in the workplace is, like you said, there's going to be times where integrity gets questioned, and I think you really shine through when you choose to have integrity at your workplace.
So here's what I'd say. One of the reasons why, because we've all experienced that moment where you think God's telling you to do something in your workplace, and you wimp out like Jonathan did. I mean, I'm disappointed it came from my worship director, but at least I appreciate your honesty. Look, here's why. Because what we think of in reaching out to that neighbor or coworker is, I got to share 5 Bible verses, or I got to put a suit on, or I got to say something really weird and awkward. Hey, just talk about Jesus? And they're going to say no, and you're going to feel terrible. Yeah. What God calls us to do is to be in relationship with those people, to be friends with those people, to love those people, to celebrate their birthday and ask them to the game and take them to a bar for a beer even, to relate to them in that way so that it comes up naturally to them. Okay, so do we have another question?
Is there one
we got one more? Okay, here we go.
My question is about how you would grow in community if, like, for example, going to like a public university when there's not a lot of people surrounding you who are diving deeper. How would you do that by yourself? Oh, that's a great question. The question, I hope you heard it, is if you're going to a public university. Yes. Because college people aren't necessarily wanting to challenge you in their faith. They're wanting to challenge you, but not in your faith. So that's a great question, Chad.
Youth pastor will take this one. I have a senior night and we bring all the seniors together, and I tell them the first 2 weeks in college has the potential to determine the next 4 years of college. Because here's what happens when you go to college. There's a couple times in your life you get to decide who you're going to be. You go from middle school to high school, you can change completely. A lot of your friends don't go there anymore. When you go to high school or to college, you can change who you are in one day. So when you get to that college, you're going to decide a lot that first week. You're going to decide, who am I going to hang out with? Who am I going to be? And so I encourage my college kids, man, you got to get plugged into a church right when you get there. Find a parachurch ministry, find a church to be plugged into. There's tons of on-campus ministries. But one of the most important things is that community aspect, because it's going to be really easy to choose different friends when you're in college.
Okay, so let me throw this out there. This is what we did. When we told our kid was going off to college, we said, okay, if you find a church to go to in the first couple weeks, we'll give you $100. So if you're a parent, money works.
That's good.
Okay, so
I know nothing of college.
So yeah, you went to college. It was a Wednesday. All right. So I want to kind of wrap it up. I got my in-laws in here, and so I'm going to talk about Uncle Stan for a second. I got this long history. My father-in-law, you were a pastor for how long? 46, 40, 50, somewhere? A lot of years. Uncle Stan, I think he still does some preaching. It's like 50 years of ministry. And every one of my pastor friends I get together with, I have 8 of them I get together with, they always have somebody coming up and saying, you're not deep enough, we want you to be deeper. It happens to all of us. And so this person came to Uncle Stan and said, hey, Stan, I feel like I'm not getting fed at your church. And he said, well, how long have you been a Christian? He said, about 20 years. And Uncle Stan said, well, don't you think it's about time you started feeding yourself?
Dang.
And you know what? I think that's what in some ways, that's what we're saying is, you all learn differently. So embrace that and go for it. Find ways that feed you. Listen to podcasts that grow you. Listen to preachers that you love. Get a part of a small group where you grow in relationship with people. Go out on a hike and meet God that way. Whatever works.
Patience. We need middle school leaders. So if you want to lead middle school,
yeah. God has designed us all differently. And so it's really a matter of finding that way that helps you grow and going further. And if you do that, you will get
10 steps further.
Oh, I thought you guys would do better. All right. Hey, thanks, guys.
Yeah, there we go. Are we going to another song now?
That's it.
Thanks for joining us.
That's it. That's the closing. So.
Oh, they got it.
They got it.
Thanks for joining us for these last 10 steps. If you'd like to join us for another journey, or if you know someone else who's on this walk, subscribe to our podcast at 10 Steps Further on iTunes, or simply search 10 Steps Further on your podcast app. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation with a question or a comment or a criticism or even a wisecrack, look us up on Facebook. We've created a Facebook group where you can be part of the conversation. We'll see you next time.